We're here with Addie Beasley. I'm Pastor Trevor, and this is Epic Convos. All right, Addie, thank you for joining us here today. Go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are.
My name is Addie Beasley. I'm going to be a senior at Wawasee High School, and I've done swimming since I was a freshman, and I'm involved in the Bible study, Wawasee Bible study, and I'm also involved in student council. So, yeah, and obviously here at Epic. So,
tell us a little bit about you in those activities. Like, you're in student council, you're a swimmer. I know you are a very good swimmer. From what I've seen and heard, you're a pretty good swimmer. So tell me a little bit about your roles in those things.
I feel like I've become more of a leader as I've kind of grown up in each of those roles. Like this year, I'm going to be the vice president for the student body and student council,
Cool.
which is like crazy. I would not expect myself to do that as a freshman, but
Awesome.
And then swimming, I was captain last year. Hopefully I'll be a captain this year. But I feel like whether or not you have the title, like you hold leadership either way. And then Wawasee Bible study, I've been helping out for a year or more, which is super fun.
I learned about Jesus jumping, which that's just a great term. For those who don't know, they basically pick a person and they're like, okay, we're going to pray for them and or tell them about Jesus. Mm-hmm. How's that go for you? How did it start for you? How's it going now?
Starting it was like one of the like scariest things I've done, because it's just like, and it shouldn't be really, because like if they say no, like pick another person, but it's just like going up to them, you're just like, I don't know if I should. But now, like, since we try to do it like once a month, so now it's like I try to incorporate more like evangelism, like literally telling them about Jesus rather than just praying for them, because what if they don't know who Jesus is? Like, who are they praying about, But yeah, it's a slow progress.
If you're just guessing here, or maybe have a good idea, like at school, if you were guessing, how many people do you think actually like know who Jesus is?
I would say it's a lot less than we realize. And I feel like it's different than knowing who he is, like, rather than, like, actually knowing him. I would probably say, like, I don't want to lowball. I would say, like,
I know, I'm on the spot here.
I want to say, like, 20, 25, maybe.
25% of students?
Maybe less.
Have a relationship with Jesus?
Oh, probably less.
Maybe less.
Probably, like, 15%, maybe. I don't know. Because I don't know everybody at the school, but I would like to say it's 15 or higher.
Okay, so Addie, how do we change that? What do we do about this?
Just showing people who Jesus is through the way that you act, because you're not going to have a conversation with everybody, but a lot of people, I feel like, are watching. A lot more people, like, you have an impact on people, whether you think you do or not. And I feel like, especially in leadership, like, people look up to you for certain things, and I feel like leading people towards Jesus is just an extra bonus. So.
And I think you don't always realize how big of an impact you have. Like, your guys' Bible study is awesome. I think that's super good. I think what you guys are doing from there is incredible. Like, kudos to you. I didn't really do that as a student. I think I attended our FCA like a couple times, and then I was like, I don't want to get to school early. Now I'm a pastor, so maybe I would do that now. But I think what you guys are doing in the commitment level you have to. How many years have you been doing the Bible study?
Well, it was started, I think, the year before I went into high school. So I started going, I don't really remember. I would say like halfway into my freshman year I started going, and then I was asked to kind of help. I don't want to say lead, because it's kind of just a group of students. So I would say like kind of design, or like what are we going to talk about, where are we going to do it at. Like I started helping out with that before my sophomore year, and I've been doing it ever since. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're also in sports. Like I said, you're a fantastic swimmer. I'm pretty sure you definitely won when I was there. Some invitational, y'all were just killing it. I was like, dang, these Beasley girls are fast.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do you do that on a sports, on a field? I guess it could be a field, but how do you do that in a pool? How do you do that at swimming practice? How do you try to be that leader and show Jesus a little bit, or however much you can, or maybe you're allowed to do?
I'd say like positivity is a really good way for me to kind of show who Jesus is. Like, I used to be kind of negative, especially about like towards myself, about just improving, and like during practice, like, oh, I'm doing so bad, like just like personal thoughts. And when I kind of like switched that, it felt like, I don't know, it was just a lot easier for me to go about practice. So I feel like leading people to be more positive is obviously, I feel like, in my opinion, like leading them towards Jesus, like small things, but also like I inspired by Mia, because she like writes a verse on her every time she runs. So I did that at state, and like I didn't get anybody to, like, no one asked me about it or anything, but I feel like it's just like a little small thing. Like, who knows if they would have looked that verse up later or something like that. So yeah, just small things.
If you can or would like to, well, I would like you to if you're able to. Can you share a little bit about why you are the way you are? Like a little bit of the Addie testimony here.
Okay. So when I was little, I went to Kids Cove. I was always kind of there. But it wasn't like I didn't really understand why I was there. And then I was going to Epic and stuff, and I just never really knew, like, I feel like I knew of Jesus, but like knowing him, I feel like that kind of started my 8th grade year. I went on a winter retreat with the church for like a day. It wasn't even like the full time, and nothing specifically happened on that trip, but I felt like I was just called for more. And so I started going to church. Actually, going back to the impact thing, a friend of mine just asked me to go to Sunday church one day, and I was like super nervous because I had always thought like church, like I was going to get judged, like, oh, she doesn't go here, like what is she doing here? And like I couldn't have been more wrong. I showed up and I felt so like loved when I was there and welcomed. And I feel like those welcome people don't get enough credit, because I was just like very like nice to see them there. But yeah, like that was just something that kind of started, like I started going to church more, and I started actually paying attention to what they were talking about. And I feel like my faith has just been a slow but steady like growth for me, and how much I've grown to know Jesus. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of little things I could talk about my testimony, but yeah, it's just like slow and steady for me.
That's okay. I think sometimes all testimonies are good testimonies, but sometimes we think too much. Like, hey, there has to be this big crazy turnaround moment, and sometimes it's just a lot of slow things in the right direction, which is good. I don't ever want there to be like, oh, this is something Addie has to battle through. Yes, people have those, and those are really good stories. But there's also people who, like, I know in my life, I didn't have like a crazy big thing as a middle schooler or a high schooler. There was never that huge event that I was like, this is something I got to really fight through. At least not to me. I mean, there were, of course, things that came up and things I had to trust God through. But when I heard other testimonies, when I first was trying to share mine, I was like, oh, well, I don't have like the story they do. And I think that's important to remember, that it's your testimony. And we have more of an impact with our testimony than we might think we do. And I know that's something that you want to hit on, is the impact of each person and what they can actually have.
I think people kind of underestimate themselves a little bit when it comes to like being kind of the body of Christ. Like, we are all kind of representing Jesus if we're a Christian. So I feel like anything you do can glorify God and should glorify God. And that's a way to, help people find Jesus. And I feel like, if you have that mindset, like everything I do is for the glory of God, then it's kind of easier to find little things that you can do to just share Jesus in small ways, like just love other people. I feel like it's really powerful.
And I think we learned that really young, and then kind of forget about it a little bit. Like, hey, hold the door open for that person, or smile at them as they come in. Like, you even mentioned, like, hey, the welcomers, they need more credit because it is welcoming. Someone opened the door to the church, they're happy you're there. Hopefully they're really happy you're there. No, they are. Our welcomers are awesome.
Yes.
Yes, even the little things, just walking in the room and not feeling people looking at you and judging you it's a little thing for each person to do, but it's a really big thing. And that has, again, more impact than we know. And vice versa. If you were to walk into the church and be immediately judged by somebody, or feel like you were, or walk into the church service and have someone look at you and you're just like, oh, why'd they look at me that way? It can also have a big impact.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be intentional with our little things and be careful sometimes with our little things.
For sure.
Well, Addie, we're talking about impact. You're a senior. So I want to know, what has God done for you? You know, why should people believe in who Jesus is? Why should people come to Epic on Wednesday nights? Epic race starting August 21st. Plug. Yeah, but what has God done for you, and why should people know who Jesus is?
I think like the more I've got to know Jesus, the more he's kind of just reframed like the way I see like my life, which kind of sounds very like ominous, but
Okay.
I feel like so much more fulfilled when I have like I put my trust and kind of like my purpose, I guess, in Jesus. Like I remember a time where I didn't do that, and it was just like I tried to find fulfillment in like my friends or like things that I had or like my family. And at the end of the day, like it kind of sucks, but they're going to disappoint you, and Jesus never will. So having that like rock in my life has been like the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I just like love, I don't know, I just kind of have more love for my life now than I did before as well.
Like one thing you said, and I think it's important to note that the things that you before said, like you're kind of putting a focus on of life in, or like that were more of your rock before, they weren't even bad things. Like family, friends, sports, school, like all those things are not bad things. But when those are the things that get us through, and those are things that the rock, well, they do change. They do go away. I no longer play high school sports. I no longer have a lot of my high school friends. And I love my parents, but I don't know, I guess sad as it is to say, they're not going to be there forever. I mean, they live close to me now, but they're not what I base my faith on. So just dive into that a little bit for me.
Your life is so like fleeting. Like you only have like 75 years, and then you're done. So like you have like your family and your friends, and like everything changes. Like people change, people die, unfortunately. Like that's awful, but like Jesus is just so consistent, and he's so like he's the way, the truth, and the life. And I feel like we really need to like just like keep that in the back of your mind at all times. Like he is the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes to the Father except through him. Like that is so powerful for me. And yeah.
That's all such a truth. It's all such a truth. And I think because it's simple, that we don't, I don't know, make it as important as it is. Like, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But like it's so powerful, because if you keep, who was it? There was a pastor who said basically keep the main thing, and that was his whole his main thing is keeping the main thing. Whoever that guy is, that's very like duh, like
Yeah.
the main thing is Jesus. Keep Jesus the main thing, and
Yeah.
do that through life. And I think that's just as simple as it is. Super helpful, because you're right. Jesus is the one. He's going to be the rock. He's not going to fade. When you're struggling and somebody can't be there for you, like you always have prayer. You always have God.
Yeah.
When people sadly leave or pass away or move or whatever it is, they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
But God still is. And I think that, again, that can just be seen in so many different ways. Addie, as a leader not only at school but as a leader at Epic, what would you say to some of the younger students, or even the students of your same age, that maybe are early in their faith, that they like to attend, but they're not really sure why they're attending yet? Like they have a good time, and maybe that's where they are right now. Share something to the younger kids out there.
I would say like really take it seriously. Like especially when you're like praying. I used to like not really understand, like I didn't really understand why prayer was so important. And now, I mean, I have like so many things that I'll go back, like sometimes I write down my prayer and I'll go back and look and be like, I didn't even know that God answered that prayer, but he did.
Ooh, I like that.
But like also like prayer and also reading the word, like it's two like main things, like, oh, go read your Bible, like go pray. Like seriously, like memorizing scripture is so powerful, especially when, I mean, not being a Christian is like so hard, especially in the world that we live in. So having scripture to kind of set your mind on is really helpful.
You just said being a Christian is really hard, which is so motivating and great. So I need you to dive more into that.
Well, I mean, our world, they're focused on sin, and Christians aren't. They're focused on the light, and the world's focused on darkness. So it's hard to keep those things separate, and be the light in a world of darkness is really hard. And you're going to be like set apart, and that's what Jesus has called us to. And it's like, it sucks sometimes, and sometimes you're not even going to feel like Jesus is there, which he always is. So your feeling doesn't necessarily dictate the truth. But yeah, like it's really hard, but I mean, we have a community, like the church is here like with you. They're fighting the same battle you are, which is super encouraging for me, at least, like just having, especially peers like my age, that like they know exactly what I'm going through when a lot of people don't. So happy to have Epic, because I get to see mostly the same people every week, and just like we share things about our life that's like hard to share with just people from school or whatever. But I mean, there's probably like 3 or 4 people where I'm like, I can tell anything to, and they just understand. Like they're just like on fire for the Lord, and like, you know, going on the same path that I am. And it's so helpful. Like compared to like having friends that are kind of surface level, that's great, but I just feel like it's so important to have people that are rooted in the faith that can help build you up.
So even for myself, it's important to have people who I look at and I say, well, that they're even more rooted, or that I can learn from. And I think that's important that we do that as well. So, Addie, so far we've talked about the impact we have on other people, and maybe just a little bit we've mentioned how others can have an impact on us as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think the people you surround yourself with kind of show who you are. So having a group of people that build you up is so helpful compared to people that like, can influence you in negative ways, especially like peer pressure, because that is so powerful. Peer pressure is powerful. So having a positive peer pressure instead of, having friends that lead you to do things that's not glorifying God is super important.
I think we saw that a lot on the high school trip this year. Did you see that on the high school trip this year? Like, where did you see that?
When I was in the group that went under the bridge, and we served homeless people, and they had like a sermon, and they worshiped and all that stuff. We were kind of just the backstage people, I guess. We were feeding, cleaning up. But I know it had an impact on me. Like, I walked away feeling a lot more, like, humbled and thankful, really. Like, I am in such a good place compared to these people. Like, they're at their lowest point asking for help, which is awesome that they asked for help from the bridge because they're awesome in what they're doing. But, yeah, I feel like it was just it touched me in a place that I haven't really, like, thought of. I mean, obviously I know there's homeless people, but just seeing it firsthand is really, like, grounding, I guess. And for them, I feel like they benefited. They get a meal, they get like a shirt, or they got like what they need for the next week, hopefully. But yeah, they got to hear the word, and it's just both ways. It was very eye-opening.
And what we did wasn't really hard. I mean, the packing in the morning, you had to keep going. What was your role when we were food packing?
I was the fork roller.
Fork roller.
Shout out to Liv, Jay, and Cooper. We rolled a lot of forks that day.
Okay, I want to talk about fork rolling because fork rolling does not sound important, but we learned honestly a lot about fork rolling. Tell me about fork rolling.
So the lady that kind of set us up and helped us while we were there, she said that's where they get most, like, that is such like a thing that helps their pride, like. And I didn't really think about it like a fork, but like I really think about it like they're eating with their hands. Yeah. Like we give them a fork and a napkin, and that's dignifying. Just like exactly, it gives them some dignity. Like they're eating with a fork, and it's just exactly like the little things. Like there's such a little thing that they're probably really thankful for, and I didn't even think about it until she said that. But.
Honestly, how like sometimes you try to look in life for reminders to make you think about God on things, or remind you to pray, or whatever it might be. At least I've done that personally. Like if I see a fire truck or a police car, I try to, like, hey, that's a reminder. Let me pray for these people. It could be a really good reminder for when you use a fork to pray for people who are less fortunate.
That is so true.
And I think that could take you a long way in life, at least in your prayer life, and just, I don't know, maybe just a little bit of humbleness as well. Like, hey, I'm eating a meal right now. I have this utensil. Not everybody has that. Even if I don't like the food in front of me. Like, I don't know. You're making me think now, Eddie. You're making me think now. And I don't know, that's really big. Because, fork rolling seemed like the least important job. Like but it was
Yeah,
not.
it
It
was
was not. And it was not a huge thing. You guys rolled tons of forks. If we didn't have them, we couldn't finish our boxes. So you guys helped pack every one of those things. And then, yeah, I mean, everybody out there, when we went later that day, they were using, like, they didn't have to use their hands. And it's dignifying to them.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I also just kind of, again, on the little things idea, like, all we did when we were out there, well, I don't want to say all we did, but we helped set up the tent. We helped set chairs down.
Yep.
We basically passed out the food and then kind of hung back.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and maybe another person went and sat down a few times with some of the people.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really strong of you guys. And then there was a moment where it was Addie's turn to pick up trash, or Addie's time. and it was just funny because you started at 1, and then you could tell, like, maybe you weren't supposed to keep going because a lady was about to speak. And then there you go. I was like, oh no, Addie. And I was like, well, she's doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they told us specifically, like, while she's speaking, just hang back, wait till they're done. And I was sitting down next to, it was kind of like me, and then the row of people were back here. So I held the trash bag the whole time. That was like my job. And this guy was just like, hey, like, can I throw this away? And I was like, yeah, sure, just throw it in. And then the next guy's like, hey, I got this trash. And then it's just like the line. And so I'm like trying to like hunch over, trying to get their trash. And I felt so bad. But you know what? It's okay.
It's okay.
It's, at the end of the day, it's fine.
You were still being helpful, and I'm sure they appreciated it.
I hope so, because I felt humiliated, but it's okay.
But I was loving it. I was just wondering what your emotions on that, because I'm watching you go, and I know you're like, you're a good rule follower. You listen to instructions, and now you're just like, oh no, here I go. I just gotta keep going at this point. I'm too far. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was awesome. I loved that. I thought that was a really good experience. I know that experience impacted me that entire week. It still impacts me. Can you share a little bit, maybe just about how serving in a way? Have you served in that kind of way before? And then, like, maybe how that impacted you since then.
Going there, I wasn't really expecting what I saw. Like, when we packed food, I was like, okay, they're just gonna come in and leave. But they were all, like, for the most part, like, they were all very respectful, and they were very, like, kind, and you know, they were using their manners. And that was like, if I were in that position, I probably would not be as kind as these people were. Because, like, it like broke my heart, because there was, like, this younger girl, and she was with 2 of her, hopefully, siblings. But she had to kind of play the mom role in that situation. Like, she was getting food for her, like, little kids, and, well, not her kids, but, like, her siblings.
Right. And she was, what, maybe a 4th grader at the oldest?
Yeah. And it's just, like, that is so, like, sad, but also, like, compared to my situation, like, I'm so, like, blessed, and I'm so lucky to have everything that I have, especially, like, having a church. Like, I have so many blessings around me that I don't even think about. And when we went there, I was like, I need to, you know, pray right now, like, thank you, Lord, so much for everything that I have. And yeah, it was amazing to see how their attitudes were towards that situation, considering their circumstances.
They're in a place that they would rather not be. I remember the lady afterwards, because there was one person who kind of went off. I think the whole thing had ended, and I don't know, maybe they showed up late, and I don't think maybe there wasn't food left or supplies left, but basically everything was packed up. Mm-hmm. And I think they were kind of yelling at one of the volunteers or whatever, and the lady came back to us, and she basically said, you just have to remember, for the most part, the people who are here on the worst day of their life.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang. Mm-hmm. Because you're right. It's not the easiest thing to... I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself putting myself in their shoes of, like, what I would do. Like, would I break down and say, hey, I truly need help? Would I accept the help? Would I be okay with it? All those things. And again, I just pray a prayer of thanks and say, hey, thanks God, I'm fortunate in the place I am. Yeah. And, you know, the life that's got me to this point. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about another trip that I know you went on. Tell me a little bit about your experience with 3SLI. 3SLI is a leadership event that you have 3 years of. Mm-hmm. And I know, you went to all 3? You finished 3?
That was my first.
That was your first one, Addie? What? Okay. So, you were a junior, going to your first one. Yeah. You're probably going to go again?
Probably.
Tell me a little bit about your 3SLI experience.
Yeah. So, I was in the first group, And it was kind of a mixed bag of like the ages for my church that were in it. It was like I was a couple of juniors and there was a couple of freshmen and sophomores. But it was a lot of information. And to be honest, for me, at least I kind of felt like I knew kind of what they were saying, and it was kind of mostly like review, which is nice to have. Yeah, I think the most meaningful part of that trip was we had like a small, it wasn't a small group, it was our entire group, and it was, I don't even know, like 25 people.
We had a big group. Our small group was a big group.
Yeah, so we like kind of just set us up in a circle, and they were just like, tell like whatever you want to talk about, like go ahead. And it just like felt like Jesus was there, like just like present. And like obviously I felt that before, but it was just like so like tangible for me. And I mean there's only been a couple other times where I'd be like God is like right here with us. It was just so raw. And yeah, I've been kind of like going back to community, like I'm kind of striving for that kind of just rawness.
I know what you mean.
I don't know.
It's just so real. It's hard to explain unless you've been in that moment. And I think a lot leads up to that moment. I think it's just you have to be able to be vulnerable and able to know people like they're going to listen. I can share to this group. But I guess that just leads to being vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
But it was such a good few days, and then it was just such a good, just truthful discussion because, again, we want to be positive, we want to be uplifting, but not everything we go through is positive or uplifting. But we can share those with other people, and a lot of things were said, a lot of good stories, a lot of sad stories, a lot of just struggles that didn't even have solutions. Yeah. It was just, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, and that's just really good to share, and I don't know, even good to hear, and not like you're happy about that, but like, hey, knowing other people go through things, and maybe can help you go through yours.
Yeah.
And I guess that gets back to community, and that gets back to the whole idea of impact. Of, sharing in that circle might have a bigger impact than you ever thought it would have.
Yeah. Because I know Cooper, like, he was encouraged by someone else that shared about they had lost a family member, and they didn't know if he or she was going to heaven, and he ended up calling his grandma, which I know recently passed away, which was, like, crazy. Like, if he wouldn't have shared that, or, like, if the other person wouldn't have shared that fact, like, that's just, like, God's plan, like, working. It was, like, so cool to see that. And, yeah, like, that was just crazy.
That was really cool. Very cool. I know he was emotional in all the good ways about that. And I think that got several other people emotional that night as well. It was good. Real talks are really good.
Yeah.
Eddie, what's like the number one thing where if you're telling other people about Jesus or your life, about God, whatever it is, like what's your number one thing? Like you're like, they need to know this.
I have a couple of stories of like where Jesus has been like I know that God is real because this happened in my life, so I'll just talk about that.
Share them.
But my cousins, they're raised in kind of, their family isn't really religious, and their whole life they kind of, like, they had gone to church when they were, like, really little, but they was kind of just, like, faded out, and they didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And I remember praying, like, for years about, like, just, like, their circumstance, like, God, like, please just come into their life and whatever, like, I can do to help, whatever. And honestly, I was kind of giving up on, like, whether or not they were going to be saved or whatever. And then a couple years ago, my cousin, she was like, yeah, I just accepted Christ. And I was like, what? Like, it was, like, crazy. Like, and they're honestly, like, against it. Like, we're like, I don't believe in that. Like, don't talk about it. And it was, like, so, like, surprising, but also, like, just so, like, gratifying. Like, oh my gosh, like, has a relationship with Christ. Like, no, she can start. And then the next summer, my other cousin converted as well. So now they're both, like, they come to this church sometimes, but they live in Fort Wayne. But it's just like my prayer was, like, that happened. Like, it was just so, like, like, direct. And it was
awesome.
Amazing. I had a coach, Andy Kreider. Some of you may know him. But he passed away because he had cancer. And it was about my 8th grade year. And he had cancer for a while. And he made a video that he played at his own funeral.
Oh, wow.
And it was crazy. And it was pretty much, like, it was a lot. But what I got from it was kind of how Christ had worked in his life. And almost how he was, like, just at peace with his situation, which I was like, how can you be at peace with that situation, which was just like amazing. But I just felt like I was saying at 3SLI, like just I felt like God like was just like there with me, like almost like, I don't know, like around me. It's hard to explain, but it was so like beautiful for me, at least. And that was like probably one of my first like real like tangible encounters with God. And I just think about that a lot, like even after he had died, like he had an impact on me, and I'm sure other people, because it was like an amazing speech. But yeah, like God was just there with us, and it was awesome. I'm Maddie Beasley, and this is Epic Convos.